Oh, perfectly timed. All right, we welcome everybody on this April 20th, 2022 for the TAC meeting for the Regional Growth Committee. Appreciate everybody joining today virtually, and we look to have an exciting meeting with various and sundry opportunities for discussion and information. So my name is Spencer Brimley. I am the chair of this particular committee. And Jory, are we going to do check-ins first? Or do you want to do?
No, I posted the sign-in sheet in the chat box. I mean, if you want to do introductions, it's up to you. I think I've scheduled 75 or 80 minutes for the 90-minute, but this morning we went almost right up to the end of the time. But we did do kind of introductions, and I got a weird.
Well, I don't want to do anything too weird. We've already crossed that threshold too many times in this meeting for me. So what I think we'll do is, if you are here, please just put your name and organization in the chat box, or click on that sign-in sheet. It looks like Jory's dropped in the chat box.
You have to give us access, Jory.
Julie, can you help us with that?
Yeah, me too.
Additionally,
yeah, sorry, this day is not my day. This week is not my week, but you guys should all have access now.
Hey, Jory, I just fixed it.
Oh, good. Julie and Rosie fixed it.
multiple fixes are in, everybody.
Another thing that's helpful sometimes, Spencer, is if you click the three little dots in the top right of your screen, you can rename your person there, and you can put your name and organization, and that's helpful.
Okay. I like my anonymity. That's why I just use B. So, but yeah, if you want to rename your screen there as well, that's helpful. But otherwise, any indication of who's in attendance today would be very much appreciated. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. And we appreciate your participation. First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our February 16th meeting. For the approval of the minutes, I'll take a motion and a second, and then what we'll do is we'll see if anybody disagrees by vote, rather than having everybody on here say yay. So we have a motion for the minutes. Have they been reviewed?
Move to approve.
Okay. Steve Parkinson, move. Or motion, excuse me. Second for Brad McElrath. Okay. Anyone opposed to the minutes as drafted and provided? All right. We'll consider those approved and appreciate that. All right. Item number 2 on our agenda is going to be presented by Jory with WFRC. It's the discussion on the 2023-2050 RTP. And when is your project needed? So Jory, we're going to turn the next 20 minutes over to you, my friend.
Perfect. All right, keep me on task. And if somebody could help me watch the chat box, that'd be awesome. All right. Thank you. Today we're going to do a quick update, RTP 2023 RTP development, and then in particular discuss the needs-based phasing. As a reminder, Wasatch Choice Vision, it's the blueprint for our region. It aligns aligns transportation, land use, economic development strategies, and it's developed based on those 10 regional goals on the right side of the screen there. So hopefully you're all familiar with those. If this is the first time you've seen them, they've probably matched almost all the goals out there from UDOT, UTA, federal highways, probably even your local goals. You'll see them up here later when we're looking at the phasing criteria and which criteria line up to which goal. But our entire plan is developed through that lens and kind of filter. The plan's multimodal: roads, transit, active transportation, which is walking and biking. It looks out 20 to 30 years. We have to constrain projects for what we can afford. So it's not just a wish list of projects, and it needs to conform to air quality standards. A reminder of why your input on the plan is so important, and why you'll see this throughout this entire year at all the RGC TAC meetings, is that nearly every funding source, state, federal, corridor preservation, local option sales taxes, all look at the regional transportation plan for a list of projects and priorities of projects. And so they're either tied to what's in phase one or if the project's in the plan. So we need to make sure we're all looking at this plan as it's being developed, reviewing it, and utilizing it as kind of the one long range plan for the region. So we have, just a reminder, over the last couple of years, we looked at external forces and policies or uncertainties in the future. That included CAV, connected and autonomous vehicles, teleworking, e-commerce and delivery, micro mobility, high priority transit, things like that. We've tested those, we've reviewed with your help, and we have a refined set of projects that are needed out to 2050. We are now almost done with the phasing process, or at least the first part of the phasing process, identifying the needs. And then this summer, we'll move to financially constraining the projects. We'll continue to explore policies with you and the RGC, which is made up of the elected officials, your mayors and county commissioners, with the goal to adopt the plan in 2023. So needs-based phasing, what is it? It's the process of prioritizing projects and when they're needed. This is independent of any funding discussion. So we're not trying to decide how much money we have and which are our priorities based on that. This is when, which decade or which 10-year, out to 2032 for the first phase, 2042 for the second phase, and out to 2050 for the third phase, when are the projects needed? Fully recognizing that we're not starting from scratch or from zero, right? In 2023, we've met all of our needs for roads, transit, active transportation. There are needs out there that have not been met. So we know that the list will be front loaded a little bit in phase one by needs, but not so excessive that all the projects are needed in phase one and no projects are needed in the second and third phase, right? So as we work through this and we get your input, take that into consideration that it needs to be a balanced plan. It needs to tie to your land uses, and hopefully when we ask you for input, you won't just give us only projects that need to be moved up, but you'll really do some deep thinking about which projects might not be needed for a little while. We're utilizing phasing criteria. And we've reviewed this phasing criteria with the state's transportation funding evaluation criteria. So the Transportation Investment Fund, the Transportation Investment Fund, so TIF, TTIF, if you've heard those acronyms, the federal transportation funding programs that we do at WFRC. So that's the one that the short range planning group, and you'll see through the Transcom TACs and Transcom Surface Transportation Program, Congestion Mitigation, Air Quality, Transportation Alternative Programs, STP, CMAQ, TAP. We looked at all those funding criterias and looked at how they lined up, not only with the weightings, but also the evaluation criteria. We wanted to make sure when we're evaluating projects totally, upside down. They don't line up perfectly. No evaluation criteria will, but they're a little bit closer. And they at least took them into consideration as, our plan. The next step is to implement and build. And, we want to make sure our funding programs kind of align with our long range planning. You can see there on the left, there's the Wasatch Choice goals. And these are the goals that we use to help us identify the phasing when a project's needed. Not all goals identify when a project's needed. Some of the goals identify when a project might just need to be placed into the plan, or utilizing some of the goals as we're reviewing projects and their impact. We walked through these with you all, the Regional Growth Committee and Active Transportation Committee. We took some input. And so on your screen, you'll see here is the active transportation criteria and its weighting. An example here of some change that we did is that we're not using Strava data anymore in our evaluation process. We're using a Layton bicycle demand that we've updated. And so we think that's a better scoring evaluation of where demand would be, rather than where select users are turning on their Strava and logging rides and looking at that data source. So we're changing things. I mean, that it lines up better with what the state's doing with their TIF and TIF active transportation and TIF first last mile. So we feel pretty good there. Here you'll see the roadway criteria and the weightings. You'll note on the right side there, wow, there's a whole bunch of scoring criteria and weightings. What does that mean? Well, we're utilizing our weighting on at least the top ones there, and anything that's different within a community. So projects that are like more on the local collector, kind of maybe minor arterial, projects that are community to regions that help provide connectivity to our larger regional system, and then projects that are really connecting our region within itself, mostly like the freeway type projects. So we've adjusted the weightings for all, those different types of projects, and we'll do a comparison kind of within each category to each other. And, it makes sense because reducing vehicle hours of delay is probably not your highest priority on a small collector type road. You want that collector type road to be more inclusive of other transportation modes, or, tied to equity focus areas where you want your freeways to really be focused on reducing delay. And so that's why some of those criteria are just different, and some of them it makes sense that they're the same. So that's the roadway side. And then the transit criteria you can see here. For instance, we've updated the existing ridership and projected ridership. They're at the top. They're now both equal, where in the past planning processes they've been a little bit different. So those are the criteria we use. They're all based out of a 100 score. We're looking at also doing a first tier of evaluation and then a second tier when we get to phasing. So we have a map, and our game plan today is to share this map with you, highlight some key changes between the phasing. We're a couple days behind schedule, which isn't too bad in the fact that we're 3 years into our planning process. So, I'm going to give a little bit of grace. I think we've met most of our deadlines. We will shoot you out an email here either Friday or Monday with a link to this map. I'll walk you through the map here in a second. We want your input. We're looking for input from you in the next 3 weeks on the phasing for all the modes: active transportation, transit, roadway. Zoom into your community, zoom out a little bit, see how it fits with the system. We're not going to wait 3 weeks and then start getting back a hold of you all. So the sooner you get us comments, we'll start reaching back with you on those. So can you all see the map here? Did it pop up? I'm looking. I got a thumbs up from Steve. I can't tell if somebody scored a goal or if he can see the map.
Yes, we can see the map.
Good, thanks, Julie. So when you first open this up, you'll see all the projects are turned on by phase. It's a little messy, right? So Matthew Silsky in our office, part of our analytics team, is a wizard at this. He has made it available that if you want to just look at, let's go look at AT projects, and know that these might change a little bit. These were just a first draft of the list. You can see projects phase 1, 2, 3. We will zoom in on, Steve's community, Roy here, and Steve will be able to look at 5600 South. And Steve will say, well, based on the scoring, it's a phase 2 need. Man, I don't think that's right. We've got money to build that project. Don't worry, Steve, we'll fix this. I'm going to leave a comment because I've, really diligent on my review of this. I'm going to put my name, my organization, contact info. Super important, because if we just get blank comments, we don't know who to do a follow-up with on the project. So please fill out all this information. Leave us your comment. We will get back to you or make the change wholesale. So comments are available and highly encouraged to make. Say, for instance, you want to look at all the phase 1 projects within your community, you can do that as well. Road, transit, active transportation, just to give a sense. So easy to play with, easy to leave comments on any of these projects. So any questions on the mapping? Pretty straightforward.
Jory, this is Jeff. Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
And this is in the realm of there's no dumb questions.
All right, Jeff.
Um,
Good.
Is every road on this RTP map also qualifies, is it also a functionally classified road?
Collectors and above. So we've, on the roadway side, we've put in collectors, minor arterial, principal arterial, freeway. On the transit side, you'll see some differences in this plan. We have core routes, which are almost to the level of BRT. They just don't have dedicated right of way, but they're more frequent. They have better infrastructure like stations. They could have stations, different options on signal priority than local routes. So they're above local route, not quite to BRT. So we'll have core routes, BRT, streetcar, front runner, tracks, right, for transit. And then we have regional bike facilities. What we don't have on here is express bus. We won't have the local buses. We won't have micro transit. Our overall map that we produce will have them kind of as a background, but the transit projects that are underneath the core routes will be part of the UTA long range transit plan. So hopefully that helps, Jeff.
Yeah,
We've done
it
quite
does.
a bit of review on the roadway side of the transportation master plans to see what projects need to be included. And there's quite a few more projects kind of on the west side that needed to be included, especially in this area. If you can see, this network down here is a lot more robust than what's out there now. And then again, this is Nikki did quite a thorough review of any new master plans that we had received and included those. So did that help answer?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. There's no other questions on that. Covered the map. Look for that email. May 13th, we're looking for comments. This will give us enough time. We'll start reviewing comments as we get them. We'll work with UDOT and UTA if you provide comments on an interchange or a transit project. That'll be awesome. And vice versa. If UDOT is looking to change a pretty significant project in your community in phasing, we'll want to make sure that each of the communities are up to speed on that. So it's a two-way street, but we want to make sure, like, you know, nothing is done in isolation and everybody's on the same page as we move forward. After we get through this piece, we will move into financially constraining the plan. This is going to be way harder than the phasing by needs. I mean, phasing by needs is difficult because we have to collect all the data, but we've got phase 1 and 2 and 3. When we get to financial constraint, as you all know, we never have all the money that we need to build everything in the future based on existing revenue, expected revenue sources, things like that. And the best example I can give you is we had about $12 billion of transit projects in our last plan, 2019 plan, and we only had about $5 billion of funding. Well, that meant a lot of projects, if a project was needed in phase 1, might have slipped to phases 2 or 3 for financial constraint, and quite a few projects moved to the unfunded portion of our plan. This will be the first time we're financially constraining the active transportation portion of our plan. So we're building a financial model with all the other MPOs in the state and UTA and UDOT, and haven't quite seen the numbers for active transportation. So we'll have to see how that looks. But this will be the first time that we're trying to elevate the priority and like identify how much funding we may have for active transportation. Meet with you all in July with the intent of getting some more input, making any changes that you all see, and then fall workshops. Those are the workshops with your mayors, commissioners, city managers, planning commission, city council, economic development, engineers. We'll come to the fall workshops. We'll get input there. Hopefully, you'll all have given us enough guidance that a lot of the changes that we'd expect from, your peers or elected officials won't be too far off base. Sets us up for our first official public comment in January, February of 2023 with an air quality conformity and adoption by 2023 May. So that is my presentation, Spencer, in a nutshell. If any questions, happy to answer that. I have not looked at the chat. I can do
Nothing
that.
in the chat, Jory. It's just the information you provided, and then some people have listed their names there. So
Okay, perfect.
no questions there. But again, thank you, Jory. Appreciate that. And also just a reminder, if you do have a question that comes up or something you thought of as we move through, please send that in the chat, just so we can have record of that and make sure we get any of those questions addressed. Additionally, anybody who jumped on after we already got started, if you wouldn't mind clicking on that link for the sign-in sheet and just go in and fill that out relative to your organization and who you are and some contact information, that would be extremely helpful today as well. So,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
this is Carrie Doan from UTA. If I might just really quickly, when everybody looks to review, this is a needs phase review. So this idea of when is the project needed, it'd be great if you could associate that with, you know, sort of the development in your cities too, like when's that development happening relative to phase would be super helpful. I mean, we all want a lot of projects, but being realistic about when things are happening in your city and what transportation is needed to comply, kind of go with that. So thanks for that.
Great point, Carrie. Appreciate you bringing that up, because I think as cities, we all have things that we'd like to do and get done, and yet development happens at its own pace. And so being mindful of how things are coming along. So thank you. That's a great point. Appreciate that. All right. Item number 3 today is the Bert Granberg, who's going to talk about population and employment. And he's going to look at his crystal ball and tell us what the future holds. So Bert, we're going to turn some time over to you, sir.
Okay, thanks, Spencer.
You're welcome.
I'm guessing you all can hear me. Yep, great. Okay, so I'm just going to give an update on where we are with the socioeconomic forecast associated with the 2023 RTP process. And if I haven't met everybody, Bert Granberg, I'm in the analytics group at WFRC. Okay, so we do this every 4 years. We update our projections. We're looking at the future distribution of population, households, and employment by major sectors. The projections basically are distributing people, households, and jobs annually through 2050, according to the county level controls that are established by the Gardner Policy Institute at the University of Utah. And to do this, we use a combination of tools and regional data resources, community feedback, and a little bit of professional judgment here and there to get our projections data set put together. We're providing, again, projections at 2 scale levels, the traffic analysis zone level, and I'll talk a little bit about that coming up. And then also what we've termed city area summary zones, which are aggregations of the TAs grouped together to look like city boundaries. And of course, the projections are important. They're sort of the default assumptions for the travel demand model. And we also use them for some of our regional performance metrics and even local analyses. So we'll be sharing not only the draft version for your feedback, but the final version for everybody's use as both interactive maps and data sets. This is probably a too busy graphic of sort of the modeling work at WFRC, but you know, if you look in the middle, really what drives our projections is our land use model, the real estate market model, or REM for short, which is going to take existing conditions, look at what some opportunities are in terms of greenfield and redevelopment, and basically play the role of a virtual developer and look for the best opportunities to add households and jobs to meet the county controls in each of that out years. For REM to work, it runs on an urban sim software platform. It collaborates with the travel model to look at accessibility and how attractive different areas are over time. But really what's needed is a mess load of data. So that's a big focus for us, is collecting and updating the input data for the land use model. And of course, the result is kind of on the bottom line, forecasts not only sort of what our urban form is going to look like, but also how our transportation system is going to perform, what individual cities population and job profiles look like, and even the air quality conformity that Jory just mentioned. So just taking the real estate market model in a little bit more detail, this time around we're establishing a new base year. So the base year for the model is 2019. We had to go grab a bunch of residential and employment data and work with it extensively to update our base year. We draw heavily on the parcel data from the assessors for building characteristics and values. And then we've got some rent data and some employment data from workforce services and the census and the IRS. And of course, those county level controls that GPI has put together, and we've all had an opportunity to comment on those last year. I'll go through a couple of examples of this, but future land use in your general plan maps is really important. It establishes sort of the capacities up to which REM can build in certain areas and the types of development. So Matthew Silsky in our group collected updated general plan data in 2020, and we'll continue to do that to keep REM current. Pipeline development projects are really important. Things that are permitted, are in progress, or even have happened since the 2019 base year. We'd like to make sure that we're asserting those appropriately in the land use model. And those sort of related to those are the large single owner development areas. So things like the point at the point of the mountain, the Daybreak Core area, some of the big developments in the southwest corner of Salt Lake County, Falcon Hill, and the base and the inland port are good examples of those. And the way we do this is we like to get a preliminary run out of REM, take a look at that, get it in good a shape as possible, and take it to all of you for comment. And I'll talk about the timeline for that in a little bit. But that professional judgment doesn't just come from us; it comes from your input. We also have to do a little bit of post-processing on the end. We don't just take the REM results and run with them. We make sure that they make sense, and we've got to do some sort of non-market type adjustments. And the base is a really good example of where development is not going to happen according to sort of a profitability timeline. These models are really data hungry. It's been described before that the real estate market model is maybe 80% getting the input data right and 20% getting the model right. That makes a lot of sense when you think about our future landscape as being firmly rooted in what's there now. So housing, demographics, land use policy, the land values, where people are working now, that's all data that we've got to keep updated and is valuable to a number of other processes. So one of the things that we did in getting ready to update our projections is we created this data set, which was an up-to-date inventory of housing units across the Wasatch Front. And you may have seen this, I've talked about it before, but this is all of the housing units in the Wasatch Front by type, by year, by value. We've got a web map that lets folks use this data to look at their city or county. And we also use it as a really important input to the real estate market model. In fact, that's the primary reason why we put this together. I mentioned the general plan maps. Internally in my group, we call this layer our G-flu layer. But it's a good kind of flu. It's all the general plan data that we've been able to collect and then sort of standardized and generalized so that we've got a region-wide view of the types of development and the intensity of development that folks are planning for in their communities. And then we're also, as part of our projections, in addition to those general plans, we're also factoring in the Wasatch Choice centers that you all have participated in defining the boundaries for and the levels. These are areas that, basically we're going to assert a higher level of intensity above and beyond what might be in the current general plans, just because the current general plans might not have been updated in recent years. So, in these metro urban city and neighborhood centers, we're anticipating and projecting as part of our work a higher level of likelihood for intensity. So that's the Davis County area, and then I've got another inset to kind of show the centers in Weber County. The last thing I'm going to show an example of, it's kind of going into our projections work, are the new traffic analysis zone boundaries. For the 2023 RTP, we'll be releasing a new version of the travel demand model, and that will have these updated TAZ polygons. We're adding about 500 to the region. So in the WFRC space and the MAG space, we're going from about 2,900 to about 3,400 TAZs. And when we created these boundaries, updated the TAZ boundaries, we looked to split areas that had different types of developments, different types of land uses. We also tried to split these a lot better in terms of alignment with city boundaries, so that when we roll up city area projections, they look a lot more like city boundaries. We had a really good case of basically a problem area in North Salt Lake, and that's one of the areas that we looked at to try and improve to make sure that the TAZs, as best as they could, roll up to look like cities. And then also we're adjusting them to align with the latest thinking on what some of the planned new roads will look like. So all of this input data that I've shown is accessible either from our maps gallery, maps.wfrc.org, or the data portal, or if you have any questions or see something that you want to connect with in terms of data resources, feel free to reach out. So here's what our timeline looks like. Today, I'm hoping that everyone can think about who the best contact is at your city to provide the preliminary forecast data and links so that they can take a look at it and give us feedback. You can do that in the chat window, or you can email me, either one, but we had about 80% of the cities respond in our TAC meeting with Salt Lake County with a contact. So there's your challenge. Jump into the chat window and just give me a name and an email of who you'd like us to reach out to get feedback next month with our preliminary forecast. We'll have that sometime around late May. I think we'll have a similar, about a 3-week period for folks to jump in, take a look at that data. We'll provide it via an interactive map, so we'll be able to look at a couple of different angles on the household population and job distribution. We'll provide city area summaries, spreadsheets. We'll have the data in GIS format if you'd rather just have us send that your way, or download it yourself and explore that. And in addition to trying to get feedback on the forecast, we're hoping to get input from the cities in terms of significant, like regionally significant project starts, either in progress or advancing in the approval process. So if you've got any larger projects that you think that we should have on our list for our pipeline projects database, that's also feedback that we'd like to get. So name, email, I'll reach out to everybody toward the end of next month, and we'll get this rolling. And then we'll take your feedback. We'll also be working to tune performance of the real estate market model at the same time, and we'll have a draft forecast out, a preliminary, I guess I would call it a final draft forecast out in August. And then later this fall, that forecast information will be distributed with the beta version of the version 9 travel demand model for folks to start to use. And then it all gets sort of a formal stamp of approval when the Regional Growth Committee and the council meet next spring to finalize the adoption of the regional transportation plan, which I think the council will do in May. So that's the timeline. We'll have sort of a substantive preliminary draft forecast for your review and input. Again, it'd be great to get your preferred contact and on your side for us to reach out to, either in the chat or via email. And that's what I've got. So I'll stop there.
Awesome, Bert. I think it's so awesome how much data and just like sheer resources are at our disposal in these days, especially given all the effort WFRC has put into creating these. So thanks to your team and just WFRC generally for creating more resources, more opportunities for us to do our work here in our cities and other agencies. So good
Thanks.
job.
I mean, can you think of a more interesting region to work in? I really can't. So
No.
It's a labor of love.
Well, good. Well, thank you, Bert. And again, we have to beat Salt Lake County or that southern area, everybody. So 80% of our attendees is over 36 people. So I'm not sure how the math works out because there's several people from one organization, but just send a bunch of messages to Bert and he'll work it all out in the end as long as we beat Salt Lake County. So, all right, everybody. Thank you, Bert. Appreciate that information. Next, we will hear from Michaela Jordan, who's going to talk about transportation and land use connection projects that have been awarded or will be awarded. Is that right, Michaela?
Yes, thank you, Spencer.
Yeah.
Today I'm sharing the 2022 awards for TLC. So we're excited to share these awards, and there we go. And as a reminder for anyone who isn't familiar with TLC, the Transportation and Land Use Connection Program is a planning technical assistance program that is a collaboration between UDOT, UTA, Salt Lake County, and WFRC. It has these 4 main goals: to maximize the value of investment in public infrastructure, to enhance access to opportunities, to increase travel options to optimize mobility, and to create communities with opportunities to live, work, and play. So this year, partners were able to contribute $1.5 million and communities matched with $457,000. This is the highest local match in program history, so that is really great. And these add together for just under $2 million in allocated funds for TLC this year. These go for 16 awards in 19 communities, including 7 in the Ogden-Layton urbanized area, 8 in Salt Lake, 1 in Tooele, and 1 multi-jurisdictional award. So now I'll go through and summarize the projects. We have 3 ordinance updates. I thought it was funny that one ordinance update is for one of the smallest communities in our region, and another ordinance update is for the largest community in the region. So we have Cobberton's active transportation plan and connectivity ordinance. We have Salt Lake City's 300 West corridor plan and zoning amendments. And we have Ogden's citywide zoning ordinance update. So they're updating their entire city code with regard to zoning and land use for the first time in many years, and are very excited about that. We funded several small area plans this cycle. We have Layton's Gordon and Highway 89 Town Center Master Plan. We have North Ogden's Southtown Commercial Center Plan. We have North Salt Lake's Town Center Market Study. This builds on previous TLC work North Salt Lake has done regarding their town center. They've looked at branding and wayfinding in the town center and done a master plan. So this is furthering those efforts. We have a historic Main Street urban design project in Midvale and a Central Point Station area plan in South Salt Lake, which will lead me to segue briefly into station area planning. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, legislation was passed regarding station area planning, and we want to let you all know that we have a web page up on the WFRC website about station area planning. Right now, it includes some resources. In the future, we'll also have a certification checklist for staff and cities to use to make sure that their plans are meeting legislative requirements. It will also have information about applying for technical assistance from WFRC to support your station area plans. So those two pieces aren't up yet, but they will be soon. So keep your eye out on that website for that information, and we'll make sure to let you all know when that information is made available there. Okay, back to TLC. We had some more active transportation plans. We have Holiday studying the I-215 corridor, looking at a potential shared use active transportation path there. And in Tooele City, there will be an active transportation plan throughout the city. We have 3 corridor studies as well. Harriman has a transit corridor and land use study. Salt Lake City will look at 1300 East in the University District. There's a mobility hub going in there, and so they're looking at circulation and how to support that. And Farmington will be doing a North Station area innovative transportation study. They're finishing up their station area plan currently. So this study will take that station area plan one step closer towards implementation and support those efforts. The last 3 projects fall into the regional and citywide category. The multi-jurisdictional project is Salt Lake County in the Southwest with Bluffdale, Harriman, Riverton, and West Jordan. They'll be doing a Southwest Waterways visioning effort. This will be similar to the 7 greenways vision that was recently completed, looking at greenways and waterways and active transportation. Then we have 2 general plan updates. We have Riverdale and West Point, and I believe this is Riverdale's first TLC award, so that's exciting. And those are the 16 TLC projects this cycle. Just a quick note on where we are at in the process for those of you who have a project that was just awarded, or for those of you to know who might have a project next cycle. We're currently in the post-award instructions and resources phase. So if you haven't already gotten a letter of concurrence from WFRC, you'll be getting that soon. Once your mayor signs that letter of concurrence, we send the local match invoice. Throughout this time, if you want to, your community project manager can draft a scope of work for your project, but project procurement can start as early as July 1st. So that's coming up in a couple months. We're excited for those projects to get underway. In the meantime, if you want to learn in more detail about any of these projects, you can go to our interactive project map. You can also look at past projects and see the statuses of any of the projects. For projects that have been completed, you can find links to their final product PDFs and look at what those projects look like. And it's just a great resource to use if you're trying to brainstorm ideas for upcoming projects in your community and seeing if TLC might be a good avenue for support for those projects. Are there any questions?
None in the chat, Michaela. So obviously you explained everything perfectly and succinctly. And so thank you for that. But yeah, no questions in the chat that I can see. But congratulations to our team. I'm going to go one step farther, Bert, and say that we beat them substantially. So thank you, everybody, for getting your information to Bert on that project. So All right. Again, please at any time, if you have a question that comes up on a previous presentation or just in general, throw it in the chat, communicate it out because somebody may have that same question, but be too afraid to speak up. Item number 5 is safety and local communities, a speed management study. And we're going to turn the time over to Adam and Jeremy relative to this presentation item. So fellas, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this opportunity to come to your meeting and talk to you a little bit about what UDOT is doing to help with speed management. Like I said, my name is Adam Lowe, and I work for UDOT Traffic and Safety, overseeing the traffic studies program. And I brought with me today Jeremy Searle, who works for WCG and has been very helpful in helping us develop this management strategy. How many of you have received complaints about speeding in your communities and have requested a speed study be performed by UDOT? And then within a couple weeks, get a study report back that says the speed limit is either set appropriately or recommending the speed be increased rather than decreased. It is something that we see quite often in our department, and wanted to do something that was a little bit more beneficial to help the communities out, to help our region traffic engineers make better decisions about speed management. So we developed this speed management program. What is speed management? It's a way that we can set speed limits based on roadway context, not just focus on the 85th percentile as we've done in the past. It reinforces target speed limits with infrastructure changes. And obviously the goal is safety, to make sure that we're setting speeds that are safe for the roadways that are in question. And the intent is to get drivers to travel the speeds that make sense for the given location, by potentially raising the speed limit or lowering the speed limit. But also gives us the option to implement treatments to increase safety, increase the safety of the existing speeds, or implement treatments to slow speeds down. So what we did is, after doing a lot of research, we came up with a new speed management study that supplements the existing speed studies that we've been doing. The target is to focus on areas like downtown in your communities, areas that are entrances to more rural communities, high crash locations, for example, around curves on a state route. These areas where we really feel like something needs to be done to help manage our speed. And so we look at additional items in the study and make recommendations that can be talked about between the UDOT regions and the local community engineers to determine what treatments could be implemented to help manage the speed. So in addition to the typical speed study where we focus mostly on 85th percent, we're looking also at 50th percentile speeds and focusing on the context of the roadway more than ever before. Our study engineers look at the surrounding area, the pedestrian access along the corridor, where bicycles are being ridden along the corridor, and then also focuses on land use, things like, where are the parks, where are the shopping centers, where are the residential areas on these corridors, and how do people need to move across these corridors, so that we can make recommendations based upon how the corridor is being used, not just what the 85th percentile is showing. So within the speed study that you've typically seen, there'll be a section called speed management, and in there, they review aspects of the road context, make recommendations for the appropriate speed on specific areas within the study area, and also identify treatments that support those targeted speeds that we're looking for, treatments to increase safety at the existing speeds that are posted, and also treatments that may help us slow speeds. And they present treatments for both low cost and short term, and also long-term treatments as we look forward to making improvements along the corridor. And once again, it's just to provide high-level recommendations of treatments that could be implemented to manage speed, and that's to be taken back to to be discussed between the region, traffic engineers, local communities to find out which ones be appropriate for their particular roadways. And so with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Jeremy. He's going to talk a little bit about the fact sheets that we developed to help educate leadership and residents about some of these treatment types, as well as the speed management process. So, Jeremy, take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that. So again, my name is Jeremy Searle. I'm with WCG. It's been really fun to work with Adam and others on this speed management process. As Adam mentioned, a big focus of this is to look at the context of the roadway and to let that help define what the speeds should be on the roadway, as opposed to having people drive faster and faster and continually raising that speed limit based on the 85th percentile. So we're hoping to create a context of the roadway where people feel like they should be driving slower or a certain speed, so that it's easier for them to do so. To do that, we've created some different techniques to implement these. We call these our info sheets that focus on different speed management measures. And I think they're really useful. They have a lot of good items on there that can help inform some of the advantages and disadvantages of each of these measures. They also give some ballpark cost estimates, some places where, or give some characteristics of where these implementation measures would be appropriate, and other examples. So you can kind of see there in the middle, that list in blue of some of those speed management techniques. And I'm going to actually switch over now to those info sheets and share those with you. These first couple pages just give some information on speed management, what it is, what it isn't. You'll notice that here it says speed management may mean engineering up. Basically, we're saying it's easier to design the context of the roadway to match your speeds. And that may mean we may need to raise the speed limit if that's what the context shows, or we may need to implement some of these measures to encourage people to drive slower. Here's some additional information on speed management, how that relates to safety and how to use these info sheets. And then the next pages, I'll show different examples of different elements that you can use. This is the radar speed sign. You've probably seen these around quite a bit. You'll notice at the top, it has some really good information showing that on average, when you implement these, speeds decrease between 2 and 10 miles per hour. They cost about $10,000. And studies have shown that they reduce crashes around 5%. I'll keep moving here, but all these have similar kind of facts about them. You'll notice down below, they give some characteristics on when some of these measures may be appropriate, what speeds or traffic volumes or number of lanes are appropriate. Along the side, they list some advantages and disadvantages, some example locations. This one here is optical speed bars. These really haven't been implemented in Utah, but we are looking to do that down in Cedar Fort, down in Region 3. We did a speed management study down there, and there's some big curves on a UDOT road, and these are kind of cool. They get closer together as you go around the curve, and they create that optical illusion that you're driving faster. And so when people see these bars going by faster and faster, they slow down. And so that helps people drive a little safer as they go around this curve and start to enter town. So we're excited to see how those function at that location in Region 3. This page talks about a road diet. We've seen those at different places across the state. One image at the top is Cougar Boulevard in Provo, where they did a road diet and added buffered bike lanes there, or separated bike lanes. So that's a cool project. Landscape medians can be really beneficial, can really slow people down, create a nice looking roadway, as well as provide a pedestrian refuge in the middle of the road for mid-block crossings and things like that. Roundabouts are very good at slowing speeds, managing those. They also have great safety improvements. Crashes go down by 88% at roundabouts. And so that's a huge safety benefit that we see there. So roundabouts are really a great way to implement some of these things. There's a few others here listed. I know I don't have a lot of time here. Curb extensions can look really good, provide some speed management benefits. Roadway gateway features, landscaping. There's also a few others here that we list at the very end. And one thing to keep in mind is that these techniques were produced, and these info sheets were produced for UDOT roadways. We do want communities to use them, and I think they're very appropriate for that. But you'll notice things like raised crosswalks aren't highlighted in here, or speed bumps or things like that. And that's because as we talked with UDOT, we didn't feel that those were appropriate for most UDOT roadways. UDOT roadways tend to move high volumes of vehicles, and we want to make sure that we can keep that mobility moving. That being said, they could be very appropriate in unique locations for UDOT roads and in many city applications. And so you can see some of those listed here. We encourage you to use these. In fact, I'll put a link in the chat so that you can download this and see it. I think they're really useful. And if you request a speed study through UDOT on a UDOT roadway, please expect that you'll be able to go out and meet on site, do a field review some of the recommendations from the study, and work together with UDOT to find solutions to manage speeds on these roadways. These will definitely be a partnership between UDOT and communities. There may be things that UDOT can do, there may be things that the city can do, but together I think they can really help improve the context of the roadway and encourage safer speeds on them. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer those, or I think that's all we had though.
Yeah, there's a couple questions in the chat that I'll just bring up, and then it sounds like there may be some questions as well. So Allie from North Salt Lake just asked if this link would be shared. It sounds like you've already answered that. And then Allie from North Salt Lake also asked, who's our contact in Region 1 for the speed study if we want to request one? So Adam or Jeremy, who's the contact in Region 1 that we contact relative to speed studies?
So it'd be anybody at the traffic and safety group. So Carrie Jacobson, Todd, Karen. If we could drop their contact in the chat box if you don't already have it. But yeah, anybody in the traffic operations area over at the Region 1 should be able to request a study. And so when you put that request in, specify that you would like a speed management study done, because it is different than except the traditional speed study that's still available.
So speed management study versus just a speed study relative to that.
Yep.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. And then there was a question earlier from Brent Chamberlain about bike safety at roundabouts and some concerns he had. It sounds like the vehicular traffic is the way that you were describing it, Jeremy, maybe a safer option, a better option, but he just brought up a point about cyclists in roundabouts, and sometimes that's taking your life in your hand relative to that transportation option.
That is a great question, and that's something that we've been researching recently, actually. You're correct. Vehicle crashes go down significantly at roundabouts. Bicycle crashes have not shown the same reduction. And so the way we design those here in Utah is we do the bike ramps before the roundabout so that we get bicyclists off the roadway up onto a wider sidewalk to go through the roundabout, and then they can go back down. But traveling through the roundabout itself on a bike, like I said, it hasn't shown a decrease in bicycle crashes. That doesn't necessarily mean they're increased, but that's what studies have shown. So we encourage people to design them such that bikes get up out of the roadway at the roundabout itself.
I'd suggest, Jeremy, that's probably just because you don't have the numbers to show a statistically significant increase or decrease. I mean, literally, I was almost hit 4 days ago on a bike going through a roundabout just south of the university here. So I know.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right. There haven't been a ton of studies in the US on that. There have been in Europe and And you're right, in Europe, they have shown a slight increase in bicycle crashes, but still show a pretty big decrease in.
Yeah.
vehicle
I
and-
sent the article related to Patrick's work because he did do a systematic review on that, and I think it's really worth considering.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's in the chat there. Thanks, Brent, for sending that. We
Yep.
appreciate
Hey,
it.
I just had one comment. This is Dave from Farmington. We had a citizen a couple of days ago that called and complained and said it was 2 a.m. and she heard cars going by her house at 60 miles an hour. And we're wondering if UDOT has ever had a system that is able to hear how fast cars go.
Only in
Hey,
Farmington.
we've seen it all.
Only in
We've seen it all.
Farmington.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, just curious.
It's the gift that keeps on giving, that kind of hypersonic hearing ability. So, okay, any other questions for the presenters relative to the speed management study?
Adam or Jeremy, does it, when a community is looking at these, is it best to just start from zero with UDOT on this management study, or maybe like look through some of these options themselves and kind of come prepared of things that they think may work that would fit with their downtown kind of plan? You know, I've recently driven through Clearfield, and holy cow, their downtown area near their city building is definitely not growing out, it's growing up. And even the feel of just the buildings feels tighter and more constrained. Or do the communities just go into this management study and then work with UDOT to start knocking some of these off the options list? I mean, is there a process chart that goes with this, I guess?
Really, it's an open book. I mean, if communities have specific strategies they want the study engineers to look at specifically, then they can put that in the request. I mean, if not, the study engineers will just go through a systematic approach and look at, like I said, the context and what works with that context and make those recommendations. If it's not brought up in the study report during the field review, the city can ask those questions and they can be discussed. So really, this study just gives ideas that are intended to be talked about and, you know, deeper and to find a solution together.
Thank you again, Adam and Jeremy. Thank you again for your presentation, and hopefully that gains some tractions for community as they look at speed management and other options. So, all right, item number 6 on our agenda today is Brent Chamberlain, who's going to talk about UDOT and USU vertiport study. So, Brent, we'll turn some time over to you.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask, I can't even find my mouse on my screen right now. How are we for time?
So we have 25 minutes left in our entire meeting, and the next 2 items are 10 minutes each. So if you hit your time,
Great.
we're good.
Okay, excellent. All right, I do not know why there we go. Okay, great. So yeah, I'm Brent Chamberlain. I'm from Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning, Utah State. This project was in concert with UDOT through their UTRAC research funds that we had a couple years ago. One of my grad students, Caitlin Hall, has been doing a significant amount of this effort and lifting. And then I had another colleague, Kun Park, who's left for UBC up in Vancouver, where I actually did my PhD a long time ago. So the 3 of us have been putting this together. The scope of this project really was try to understand a potential disruptive technology in transportation being drones or UAM. And we were trying to identify if we could develop some sort of map across a WFRC for suitability sites that could potentially be suitable for vertiports. Before we get into the details of this, I just wanted to clarify. So UAV is often referred to as unmanned aerial vehicle or unchartered. We're trying to make it more gender inclusive, thank goodness. And we do refer to these as drones. The systems that we were really looking forward to had to do a lot more with residential type of delivery, though the work that you'll see at the end is applicable to beyond that. So these are smaller systems, 3-5 feet sort of wingspan, which was the use case. And we weren't looking as a use case directly for aerial taxis, for instance, for people. And just to define what a vertiport is, so there are some different ranges of these. So we've got a VertiHub, Vertiport, VertiStop. New Air has put this work out. A VertiHub really is sort of a transportation center. So you can think of this as an intersection between, helipad kinds of things and more conventional standard transportation systems. Vertiports, a little bit large, like a little bit smaller to that notion. It's not meant as a primary hub. And then VertiStops really are very small residential centric kinds of spaces. So when I'm referring to Vertiport, I'm kind of talking that space between VertiStop and Vertiport on this diagram. The project that we went through was really starting in a few different phases. So going from what might actually be capable in terms of where vertiports could be to suitable spaces. We submitted another proposal a couple weeks ago or a few weeks ago to understand the feasibility of those suitable sites. So where we're at right now is really on this conceptual modeling, theoretically what's actually there. And you'll see in the imagery in a little bit later that doesn't mean that what we're saying should be done in any means. It's just theoretically it is quite possible. So that's the first stage we start with. Then we move into feasibility, and eventually you start getting market and government, public sector involved, where you go towards the acceptability and implementation. What we were doing in our work is taking roughly about 36 or so different GIS data sets from the WFRC area, from WFRC themselves and the UGRC, formerly AGRC, and we looked at a few different components. So certainly the built environment, aspects of the natural environment that would relate to suitability, and different value-based elements. And in the middle of doing this project, we identified that there really is not enough knowledge, even internationally, on value-based systems related to vertiports. This study was, at least from our sense, the first publicly funded in the nation. There certainly have been some consulting firms that try to do work like this, but they often have different use cases. So we ended up getting a little bit more funding to do a perception study on UAM. And that study, I'm happy to share it later. It's in review right now, been in review for about 9 months. One of the aspects of that study that we shared is to provide people some sort of context. And here we gave them a map. We asked 6 different questions in random order and said, imagine your home is in blue and a vertiport, which we defined as a certain size, and we gave them a certain noise level and that kind of stuff, would be in 3 different distances in relationship to your house, as well as in relationship to a community center, as you see on the bottom. So blue would be the home at the top, and purple or pink would be the vertiport area. And then on the bottom, you see blue as a community center and the pink as a vertiport area. So we were asking people, how many drones do you think would be reasonable to fly into these areas, as well as a whole host of number of things. What other kinds of sites would be reasonable, and perceptions and nuisances and those kinds of things. But we don't have time to go into the full study. So here's some of this. What you're seeing here is in blue is a residential question, and the green, what are the community-based questions? And on the left-hand side, on the y-axis, is a representation of the number of drones that people said would be acceptable to fly into those areas. So you can see within the same neighborhood, and I'll flip back here. So that's the one in the top right, that's several blocks away. There was a statistically significant higher average number of drones that people felt comfortable with. These are confidence intervals for those that are interested in that. And then you'll see there's definitely a NIMBY effect, right? So next door, right next door to you, there still was some interest and willingness to have drones in an area, but we have to take that in context that this is a study that spanned both urban and rural communities. So it might be different whether or not people were in an apartment complex and they're willing to have something right next door versus somebody in a less dense suburban or rural community. We haven't differentiated all those yet here. But interestingly enough, the community center kind of holds constant. And I think that's something to consider when you're thinking about the potential of UAV in the future and how you go about designing, developing spaces and land uses that might be associated with community centers. So when we took all these data and looked at these different rules, these different perceptions, we developed a spatial rule set that we use for each of these different data sets to overlay those together to identify places of suitability and give us a gradient of that. This is one of the more complex rules to consider, where the simple ones are, yes, this is an area that's good or an area that's not good. Here is one where we're looking at a school and we're suggesting, yes, school operates as a bit of a community center, but it is not a place where we'd want a drone to go into or have access to directly, certainly not as a vertiport. And right next to the school could also be problematic, but nearby may not be. So just as a theory of that, spaces that are somewhat within proximity could be reasonable, but not right next to. And there are, of course, FAA regulations and policies associated with this too. But the distance, I think, can be useful because it is a place that people tend to frequent. So what we did in these data is generate maps that we'll be sharing. I'll show you here one of those instances. And I think this is really important to consider as you think about this. This is really nascent. It's really new. It's a potential disruptive system. If you think about what the car was perceived as in the 1920s and 30s, it is most definitely not what we're talking about today. And I have no idea personally if UAV is going to be the equivalent to the car or something else, but it certainly has a potential to be disruptive and go into directions that we're not necessarily even anticipating. So with that in mind, what we've developed here in the suitability map is data that is connected at the parcel level. And this includes all areas that are currently developed, areas that are vacant, but we've also broken these down into areas that are sort of the opportunity zones and transit zones. Certainly we have data just for vacancy, so we'll separate those maps out so it's easier to see when folks want to get into it. But here I'm just showing you the full level suitability of space. The orange means that it's like a low or negative suitability. Most definitely don't want to go there. And the darker the green, the higher the suitability. These ranges aren't distinctively different, like a large gap, but meaningfully they do represent some differences. So just to give you some ideas in here, you can see how the representation of, here I'll change the transparency. So a lot of these areas have, development that's already in them, and we're including all residential areas, commercial areas, except those that there may have been some sort of condition where it wasn't useful. We've also included setbacks from all the roads for various different reasons. I'll notice here that parks are actually included because public surveys indicated that parks were a reasonable consideration. Not that I'm recommending UAVs go into parks, but it might be worth that consideration as a community. So these areas up here were considered more highly suitable. And a lot of this stuff will be detailed and documented, and you'll be able to have access to those data. And my hope is that we can get into that next state of this feasibility pending the next UDOT funding round. So with that, I think I'll see if there are any questions, quick questions at all, and I'll pull up if there's anything on chat, if I can find where the chat bar is on here.
Thanks, Brent. No, I don't see any questions in the chat bar at this point. I'm just scrolling through real quick. It looks like, yeah, just running past the speed management stuff. Yep. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting concept and idea, and you guys have put a lot of good work into it. I know I've had a council member who's talked about Frisco, Texas, and unmanned aerial vehicle type stuff, and planning for that and preparing for that, which is the first time I ever heard it other than this presentation. So,
and I think it's important to note, like, our use case certainly was residential, but air taxis are not out of question. And also to consider that this could be relevant for emergency vehicles. So some of you may know of, all the fires that happened in Boulder, and to think that, it took a while for the fire department to identify where the fire was. And it wouldn't be out of the question to think in the future to have some dedicated vertiports that could serve emergency functions like that, where you can get more eyes on the ground. So think about that in terms of land use possibilities and development standards as that comes forward.
No, that's great. Thank you, Brent. We appreciate it. Great information.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Thanks for having me join, I should say. Appreciate it.
You betcha. Item number 7, I don't think our presenter is here. Jory, is that right?
Yeah, I don't see her here.
Okay. So
we might have had a slip up of communication on, she wasn't here this morning either, so.
Yeah. All right, no worries. We'll bump that for our meeting in July. which brings us to item number 8. And so item number 8, we provided a list of items that could potentially be included on that, which include some of the stuff we talked about already, the draft financially constrained 2023 RTP, one of everybody's favorite conversations, HB 462, relative to housing and station area plans, and some of those things I really appreciate WFRC and their efforts to create resources and support relative to all the new opportunities that cities are given after each legislative session. So well, that's something we'd probably discuss then, because there will be some reporting that comes out on housing and other implications. So and then green infrastructure, and then lastly WFRC funding programs, kind of looking ahead to those opportunities. So Jory, is there anything else on there? I'm going to do the vote here in a minute, but and everybody says vote, what is he talking about? I'll talk about it in a minute. Anything else, Jory, that we need to do for other business?
Just that if you have any other future agenda items, really appreciate Brent, Adam, Jeremy coming in and chatting with us. It doesn't need to be the WFRC show where we present all items. So we're always looking for good information, good topics. There's some core topics we like to bring with TLC or our RTP, but if there's items you'd like to hear about or want more information, let us know.
Great reminder for all of us. If there is stuff going on that you think it'd be valuable for the group, please let us know so we can include that and get you in front of this group. So last item on our agenda, it's not actually on the agenda, but it's something we discussed. So we've been virtual in this group for some time. And there was a question that came up of whether or not we wanted to go to an in-person meeting coming up in July or in the future type of thing. So what I'd like to do is, with the 36 remaining people online, get kind of an indication of whether you're in person or virtual. And do we want me to do an in-person vote, Jory, and then a virtual vote, or what's the best way to do that?
This morning we just had people kind of raise their hands. If you click the bottom right, there's a reaction button, raise your hand. I don't think anybody from WFRC voted this morning. We're kind of at your mercy. If you guys would all like to have a meeting in person, we'd be more than willing to host it at our offices. We've got some new technology there that allows, if a couple people can't attend in person, then it works. But yeah, so I think we use that kind of raise hand, or Steve threw his thumb up, I saw. So
he was watching.
Raise hand stays, the thumbs up eventually goes away. So
yeah, that was for a soccer game. That wasn't for the vote. So, so I think what we'll do is, because we have been predominantly virtual, or we have been virtual for all this time, I think what we'll do is ask you to vote relative to in-person. If you are interested or wanting us to have an in-person meeting, go ahead and click. So if you hover over the bottom part of your Zoom screen, and on the right says reactions, you click that and you can raise your hand. Or throw a hand up, or throw an emoji up, or an appropriate emoji. But if you'd like to do in person, we're going to kind of get a straw poll here of who's interested in that, and go from there. I will say, as you vote, take your time. We've got a few minutes here. There have been benefits that a lot of people have expressed to the virtual. Also recognizing it's nice to be in person. It's nice to have those interactions and those opportunities as well. So, and hybrid meetings always create opportunities for growth and learning relative to technology. That's how I'll say it. So, Jory, let's see here. I've got 4. And you probably got a different screen set up too.
And we got 5.
Okay, 5.
But there's a handful of WFRC, and then, probably a couple of people sleeping.
What is, if we put our hand up, we're voting to stay?
No, you're voting for in person if your hand goes up. So in person, hand up. If you don't, then you prefer the virtual, right, Jory? Is that kind of how?
Yeah, and it wouldn't be for all of them. I think we're just asking for this upcoming July meeting.
Yeah, the next meeting, sorry.
Sounds like a horrible idea. It's the middle of summer. Let's not, waste time.
I think I know Sherry's vote, even though she didn't put her hand up or not put her hand up. I know her vote. So we've got, yeah, I see 5. Okay.
All right, well, we can see what the Salt Lake group is gonna do, and we'll kind of see if we want to do in person or hybrid, or I'll chat with both the chairs.
Well, and I think it's also important, we haven't talked about doing this in some time, so at some point, we needed to have this conversation and kind of start the ball moving this direction so that we can start to make plans. So we appreciate, the people responding to that and giving us a heads up. But yeah, we'll try to communicate out to the group, keep information flowing to you so that we don't miss anything. So thank you for voting. If you're embarrassed, you can take your hand down. If you're not embarrassed, I don't care. It's not really a big deal. I was just kidding. So, all right. That is the end of our agenda. Our next meeting will be July 13th, 2022, smack dab in the middle of summer. So get your sunscreen on and be excited for those various and sundry opportunities. And please, if you have something that you would like to present or talk about, or you think is valuable to the Ogden-Layton area relative to regional growth or just opportunities in general, please get those to either me or to Jory or the WFRC team so that we can have a discussion. So anything else from the group in these remaining 7 minutes? We're going to finish on time. I say that and somebody's going to speak up. Oh, Julie unmuted.
I was going to say thank you for chairing the meeting.
Perfect. Okay, well, everybody, hey, thank you very much. Have a wonderful, wonderful springtime and enjoy this nice weather that we're having. And thanks for being here. And we will see you all in July.
Bye.
Over and out.
Thank you.